can tell you people they were the devil's children.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, if my girls will permit me, I am going to plunge right in, because we are yet again gratis, the couple that will never stop giving, having to deal with matters that are fallouts from and consequences of their splendidness. So, Catwoman says, this trip was no more a success than William and Catherine's tour was a failure. It's all determined by the media coverage, and for some reason, the media has been sucking up to the Harkles. I'm just wondering what all of that is about. Well, I will tell you what it's about. My accounting genius has been in touch with me, and he says that I need to be aware of the fact that the reason why the press are being so generous to the Harkles, as this Catwoman puts it, is that it's all to do with clicks. Evidently, if you have a negative article about Meghan and Harry, it only gets a certain number of clicks, because the people who like them don't click onto it. But if it is a positive article about them, the people who like them click onto it, as well as many of the people who do not like them, so that the latter will keep themselves informed as to what is going on and how they are being presented. He says it's very simple, it's very straightforward, it's all down to clicks. So there we have it. Harry and Meghan love click and love being clickbait, and the press love it as well. The press want to sell their product, and the only way to sell their product is to rope in as many people as possible. And since much of this is evidently done on the internet nowadays, and you will excuse me if I use old-fashioned terms because I'm very untechnological, sorry. But many of the newspapers' prime income now is not from selling the physical newspapers. It is to be found on their online branch of their publications. So, your point though, Catwoman, is a valid one, because William and Catherine's trip, for instance, in Jamaica, I know it went down very well in Jamaica, and the Jamaicans liked them. And even the Prime Minister, who was effectively bounced into being a little bit less gracious than he would otherwise have been inclined to be as a result of that Jamaica's version of Meghan. Lisa Hannah, beauty queen, Miss World, I know how to play to the cameras, and caused a whole ruction. Well, despite all of that, the trip was evidently very successful. But as that dreadful word, optics. The optics were what were the problem, and the press mischievously ran with it. Now, if you know anything about history, our press is behaving now the way the Russian press behaved between 1905 and 1917. Once there was press freedom, the press which had the viewpoint that the imperial system should be altered significantly, but that it would never collapse. They went hell for leather to effectively and succeeded in destroying, thanks in part to their efforts, the imperial system. It has to be said, on its own, I do not think the press would have brought the downfall of the dynasty. The war did it, and the complete mismanagement and really the dereliction of duty of the Tsar and putting the government's hands in those of the absolutely incompetent Tsarina. That was the primary cause, but the ground had already been laid. The foundations had already been weakened by the press. And the press in this country is doing the exact same thing in the belief that the royal family are a permanent fixture and that no matter what happens, they are not going to be got rid of. So on the one hand, you have those who want to get rid of them, for instance, the left-wing press, who are working to get rid of them, but do not believe they're ever going to be able to get rid of them. And on the other hand, you have the more moderate and the right-wing press, who also believe that they can say anything they want, and ultimately it's not going to do any damage because the royal family's position is so secure that it is unshakable. So they're shaking it, and it's going to be a big surprise to them should they succeed in dislodging it. But then, if ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Antoinette Mason says, "Dear Lady C, greetings to you and your fur babies. Greetings to you too, and woof woof. You look like summer in yellow, and I hope I look like summer in the pink. What do you make of Petronella Wyatt's article in the Telegraph this week, implying that William is the problem's son, who is stopping a reconciliation between Charles and Harry? She says she is a friend of Camilla." Pigs fly. Just because you've met someone doesn't mean you're a friend. Pigs fly. Anyway, so is she a credible source? And is Buckingham Palace now briefing against Kensington Palace, and why? Excellent question. I like your perspective. You've picked up certain nuances, because the Telegraph, you would imagine, was going to be pro-royalist. Yes, but the point I just made is equally valid in this instance. Shake, 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 and don't expect to dislodge anything. The Telegraph is well known to have pro-Meghan and Harry and pro-William, Catherine, the King and Queen journalists. Teams, really. Teams. So, how credible is Petronella Wyatt? Oh, well, Pepsy baby. Pepsy baby is a journalist. Now, I have to say, I have nothing against Pepsy baby. She's somebody I've met, and we're not friends, and we will never be friends. She's not my cup of tea, let's put it that way. But you need to understand the way the press works. I think I just explained it in part through what my esteemed accounting genius friend says. But also, they are always looking for and need a new story or a new angle on an old story. Pepsy baby is a journalist. Sorry. I'm desperately trying to put into acceptable words my true thoughts. Let me put it this way, without giving my comprehensive opinion of dear Pepsy. Let me say that she does come out with some classical and totally bizarre and illogical nonsense. But she has a roof over her head, and she needs to keep it over her head. She also needs to keep in with her employers. Now, Pepsy has been a very obliging employee, take my word for it. When she was at The Spectator, my goodness, did she make a spectacle of herself over Boris? Less said about that, the better. But she didn't need to fake any diving enterprises because she had 2 buns in her oven gratis, Boris, that would definitely have popped out without the benefit of diving between the knees at 5 months. So, Pepsy was very obliging when she was on the Telegraph. She was in love with Boris. And I'm not saying that she is similarly obliging now that she's on the Telegraph, but she has a very obliging nature. And she is a good journalist. She will therefore come up with a perspective, irrespective of the level of gravitas or a reality that it possesses. She's not a friend of Camilla's. Do you think if she'd been a friend of Camilla's, she would be writing what she's writing? Also, the press at the moment is going hell for leather to perpetuate the narrative and give further dimensions to the story with this reconciliation nonsense. Now, Pepsy does make a very good point. She forgave her mother when her mother did something terrible to her. That's very commendable of Pepsy. I have no doubt that Pepsy has a good heart. Well, as Aisha Jaipur, the late Rajmata of Jaipur, used to say, be careful if you're not too open-minded that your brains don't spill out onto the street. The same can be said for being so good-hearted that you say yes when an no should do instead. So her story was, it fits in with the direction that the press wants the public to go. And it wags a finger now at William because, well, maybe William didn't fancy Betsy as much as Boris did, and he should never be forgiven for that. Or maybe Betsy just has the natural envy of the second rate for the first rate. Meow. Whatever, it shows that she has no understanding, notwithstanding her problems with her mother. Her mother, incidentally, suffered, if I remember correctly, from dementia. And she was none too sane before she got demented, let me tell you. She looked like one of the fortune tellers from the 1950s outside of a shack in Bratislava. That's what she looked like. And acted pretty much accordingly too, let me tell you. It's very inconvenient when you know the people you're speaking about. Meow, again. Well, it's all very good and well, but to use her forgiveness of her mother, and also by her own admission, she at times was pretty doolally herself. So, and her mother did call the police on her unfairly, but that was a dementia episode. Harry does not suffer from dementia. Well, not the sort that Betsy's mother suffered from. Let me put it that way. So the two situations are not analogous. Also, Betsy was her mother's daughter. Betsy also needed to keep in with her mummy to get the inheritance. Let's remember that as well. Forgiveness definitely had a financial incentive. And how dare she say to William that William should be forgiving Harry and that William is standing between the king and Harry. It's absolutely not true. She's also, by doing that, making Charles out to be wet, weak, and dominated by William. It's not true. Quite frankly, I think Betsy has yet again shown what poor judgment she has. If she'd shown she had better judgment, she would now be the mother of two bambinos, and she would also be a married woman, or maybe a divorcee. But she certainly wouldn't be rattling around, still a singleton, still trying to land the one man that she's never been able to land, whomever he may be at the moment. And I mean, really catty, but I have to tell you, I think her intervention was inexcusable. So, and I'm making no excuses for it. And I'm casting aspersions in her direction because she deserves them. Simple as that. Anna Bernadette says, everything that was filmed was done in the fashion of a closed film set. The end product will be filled with crowds, swarming photographers and the like. Netflix will make sure that, like the Harkles' first docuseries, this one will have all the bells and whistles to make Harry and Meghan look like the royal superstars that they are in their minds. Look at H, look, we're being pursued by the paparazzi. In the garage with the wall directly behind, and the car hasn't started yet. Yes, well, I hope they're going to cut this one better than they cut the last one. Anyway, she now makes a good point, though. 20 years from now, people will watch the Netflix docuseries and not be any the wiser. The truth doesn't matter. It's their truth they want to go down in history, and it will. You make a very good point. The fact of the matter is that Nigerian trip, Harry and Meghan were accompanied by their own film crew and their own photographers, and very little that was disseminated save through their good offices. That needs to be borne in mind. You would know it from the enthusiasm that has been shown by the tabloids. I think we should maybe start to call them the gutter press again, because that's what they used to be called. So everything that we saw, or virtually everything, was distorted through the prism of their lens, one of Megsie Baby's favourite words. Arch propagandism, that's what it was. Why have the press on both sides of the Atlantic lapped it up? As my good friend explained, and I've shared his wisdom, because by coming up with positive coverage, they cover the whole gamut from A to Z, while if it's truthful, it may be A to D, and if it is negative, it may be A to B or F, but it's not A to Z. And interestingly enough, more people who dislike Harry and Meghan will read something positive about them than something negative. That is what the research shows. And very few commentators or writers or whatever the other words would be, talking heads, have a fully independent position. Only those of us who are truly independent can speak the truth. Everybody else is compelled for commercial and professional reasons to toe the party line. Kim Ludke says, I've been wondering why the news of Archewell's alleged delinquency came out when it did, to be in time with the Nigerian trip, and why Governor Newsom would get involved publicly in defending Archewell, that is, Harry and Meghan, rather than his own state's action. How does a former cable TV actress and her prop, you gotta do what I say, dominatrix and submissive, we come. If you don't behave yourself, you're never gonna come with me. No, not at all. You wanna come with me? You better do what I say. Sorry, being naughty. How does a former cable TV actress and her prop get this kind of support from a governor? Gordon Getty's alleged connection is interesting. Can't wait to hear about all the detail of the connection. In my opinion, Newsom getting involved publicly made it a whole lot worse and curious. Well, it doesn't take... Well, let me rephrase that. My investigations have confirmed that this was a deliberate attempt to expose Harry and Meghan by people who do not approve of how they're milking the system. There are bureaucrats and employees and former employees, even those who have signed NDAs, who can silently circumvent the whole business by tipping off someone or someone does it on their behalf, so it's not they who've done it. There are many ways to circumvent an NDA if people are sufficiently resourceful. And Newsom, by getting publicly involved, simply made the whole thing a whole lot worse, because he has shone a light that not all people who support the Democratic Party are pleased with, in the rampant support that he was prepared to give to this couple. I'm going to just look at my notes and see what I was told so I can maybe quote. There are bureaucrats who transcend political affiliations in all establishments and work for the good of the country, as well as those who are simply in opposition to the elected governments. Representational government is a sometimes messy business. So there we have it. Why did he leak to their support? I'm going to get to that in the next part of this question, which is Jill Armentrout says, "Hi, I'm American. I've been a Democrat for 50 years. I've had suspicions about Gavin Newsom's character for a while. Now I know that his only purpose for being in politics is ambition. I don't trust him and will not support him. What the heck does Meghan have on him? Curious minds want to know. She doesn't need to have anything on him." He was parachuted in on the back of Getty money. He is Nancy Pelosi's nephew. Nancy Pelosi still has influence. The Gettys still have influence as well as money. Now, Nancy Pelosi also has a very great deal of money now. But I have been assured that Nancy and Paul Pelosi are really worried that if there is a change of government before they go to the great party in the sky, that Paul might end up as a guest of the federal government. Because evidently Paul has made a very great deal of money. And there are lots of questions that can, and I am told, might well be asked about how he made so much money and the extent of Nancy's interventions on his behalf. There is also emerging, evidently, the fact that Nancy Pelosi is the one who did not ratchet up the original demonstration on the 6th of January to the extent that she should have. Now, I'm not American and I don't want to get involved in any of the pro and anti-Trump and Biden problems that are so prevalent in the United States at the moment. But evidently, there are questions being asked, which is very awkward for Nancy Pelosi, ultimately. And she was even at the Oxford Union the other day, arguing against populism. The motion was basically that populism is the truest form of democracy. And to the extent that a popular vote is regarded as the democratic vote, and that true representation is of the majority and not the elitist minority, which basically she was saying, well, nowadays the catchment area of voting isn't the way it used to be. Populism now doesn't mean what it meant 200 years ago. And 200 years ago, the average person who did or didn't have a vote might have had a valid opinion, but now only people who I think have a valid opinion should have a valid opinion. Which she's a rank elitist, according to people who know her and like her. She cloaks herself in and has evidently done quite a lot of good in some areas for certain segments of the population. And she has many supporters. But the fact of the matter is that if you listen to her argument before the Oxford Union, she is frankly and rankly elitist. With all of that coming into play, is it any surprise that Gavin Newsom would have leapt to Meghan and Harry's defence? Yes and no. And the yes is self-evident, but the no involves the fact that Gavin Newsom evidently is in talks with Meghan to go into business with her, with Archewell, with a right oik, or whatever it's called today. Oh, American Riviera Orchard. Fancy. We're so fancy. We're just classy with a capital K. Is that true? Well, nothing wrong in going into business, but to use your position the way he used his position, I would have said is not only a solecism, but an abuse of power. Because he didn't need to do any of this. He could have let his department that he has thrown under the wheels of the bus, his department could have announced that an error had been made or that the matter had been rectified. He didn't have to humiliate his department, but he chose to humiliate his department. Well, it says an awful lot about the regard that Gavin Newsom has for keeping Meghan and Harry sweet. But I'll tell you, when you have been an observer of how power plays out at the top levels, you realize that people sometimes get things gloriously wrong because they don't understand that there are wheels within wheels that create nuances. And I remember a few years ago, not that long ago, one of the high commissioners waded in with a royal matter, thinking that he was protecting the Queen, the late Queen, and he wasn't. And I had to phone him up and warn him that he should avoid making any further comments on the matter, because he thought he was being supportive, but he was not being. Now, I don't think that's totally analogous with this situation, because there is a little doubt in my mind that Gavin Newsom does have an in all the way to the White House, and that the present administration does not want to do anything that would demean the value to them of such political supporters of theirs as Meghan and Harry. But Gavin Newsom wasn't such a supporter of hers that he was going to allow her to be nominated as Dan Feinstein's replacement. So let me leave it at that. Salsa Shakers says, I just read on social media that the King wants to know beforehand if any Commonwealth country offers Harry and Meghan a visit. The King wants to know about it. Did you see this? No, I didn't, but it wouldn't surprise me. But I'm going to explain to you again the complexities of power, because things are very simple, but they're not necessarily straightforward. And it's very easy to make a wrong judgment call, or to misassess a situation. This is the reality of government, of politics, and of grand position. You don't always choose the right side. You don't always make the right judgment call. Things are always a lot messier and murkier and more complex than they appear to be the further away you are from the wheels of power. There are fewer nuances the further away you are. Now, the reality is that basically what's going to happen, in my estimation, is, and what I've witnessed happening in the past, is a quiet word, and sometimes not even a word, just a look. I've even seen it in courts of law, a look that shoots the message across. No words need to be said. So, however, it can't be cack-handed. The King needs to make it obvious, and the government and the state needs to make it obvious to all concerned, all governments concerned, that Harry and Meghan are not a part of the institution, and that visits from them should be discouraged. Now, this visit caught everybody on the hop, because Harry is still the patron of Invictus, which hopefully he won't be for much longer, because the King needs to understand that as long as Harry remains the patron of the Invictus Games, he is providing him with a platform for creating mischief throughout the Commonwealth. This is going to be an ongoing issue until it is resolved. But I'm touching upon it now because only cursorily, because this is an issue that is time and again going to be coming to the fore in the foreseeable future. Take it from me. This is not the last we're hearing about this. The king is ultimately going to need to stand Harry down as patron of the Invictus Games. Otherwise, he is handing him a weapon to use against Charles the King, the British Crown, and ultimately the Commonwealth. Don't think that there is not an awareness of that fact. There is. But I suppose the hang yourself rope thingy, bobby thing has kicked in to be vague about it. But to be less vague about it, the business of giving them enough rope, sometimes you can give people too much rope and they'll trip you up with it. If you bear all of that in mind, any leader has to be mindful of not stirring up opposition by giving the opposition tools with which to attack the leader. There are always people who have a sympathy for somebody who is an outlier, who is on the outs somehow, who wishes to present himself or herself as an underdog or a victim. A lot of people, even those with good heads, sometimes have bleeding hearts and don't understand that people of character actually need to do what they need to do and not indulge their passions and their sentiments to the detriment of the overall good. But if you bear that in mind, that all leaders need to be aware of incipient and actual opposition, you will understand why softly catchy monkey is often the most advisable course. So the message needs to be got across gently and without getting the backs of people up, and also without people thinking, they're trying to tell me what to do. They're trying to usurp my right of choice. All of these are considerations that need to be factored in when you are dealing with leaders and leadership. It's all very well for the public to talk and say, something should be done. And now, right now, I want it done. I would do this way. I do that way. Well, yeah, we'd all do it this way and that way if we only have ourselves to think about, or our narrow circle, or our small world. But if we have the whole world to think about, it's more difficult and it requires greater finesse and subtlety. But having said that, I have seen in other situations where the palace has very quietly and gently let people know that this is an association to be discouraged, or that is someone to be avoided, or it won't go down so well if you do such and such, or this support for such and such is not going to be in your ultimate interests. Having said all of that, until Harry is stood down as patron of the Invictus Games, neither Charles nor any member of the royal family can complain about the fact that he is misusing a gift. They gave him the gift. He is misusing it. It is very apparent that he intends to misuse it and will continue to do so until the gift is removed from him. You do not give a loaded gun to somebody who is going to shoot up everybody everywhere. You don't. And this is precisely what it now emerges has happened with Invictus. Yes, well, to round this off, I'm going to go with Carol VV 5ESS, who says, Meghan had power to do so much and blew it. And that's both sad and infuriating. As a woman, I thought what she was saying would benefit 50% of the planet. I got that wrong. She was an insult to so many women. Well, there is no doubt that Meghan Markle is truly bizarre. She is a study in every single personality disorder that I can think of, all rolled into one cocktail. She is narcissistic. Let me rephrase that. She exhibits the traits of narcissism, antisocial personality, manipulativeness, histrionic personality, oppositionalism, passing itself off as exhibitionism. The woman is a walking advertisement for a cocktail of personality disorders. She is brazen, she is common and crass and vulgar, and I use the word common in the way that Nikki Haslam uses it. Normally I dislike the word, but I think in this instance everybody would agree that she shows a degree of tastelessness that is truly just odious. She is opportunistic. She is everything that most people that I know who have any integrity or ethics would regard as undesirable. She was given one of the most wonderful opportunities that any human being on earth has ever been given. The gift that she was given, the enormity of the gift, it's mind-boggling that somebody could have been given so much and have been so niggardly and mean-spirited and craven and just spiritually unevolved and greedy and egotistical and selfish and money-grabbing and attention-seeking, and really just the absolute opposite of what any life-enhancing human being would be. Totally lacking in loyalty, totally lacking in what family values are all about, totally lacking in what modesty and decency would be about, to have been given that and squandered it and treating us on a daily basis to an exhibitionism of crass vulgarity is truly remarkable. And that's why people remark. You know, I would love to see this whole situation begin to wrap up. It's not going to begin to wrap up until Harry is stripped of Invictus, because that is a platform that they are using and will continue to use. And if the royal family really wanted this to begin to be wound down, there are elements of their deportment and conduct that are already out there in the public domain that remain unresolved, that the simple resolution of these issues would actually checkmate Meghan and Harry. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening. I had more ground to cover. Sadly, I don't want to burden you with a longer episode than this. There was a lot more ground to cover, but tempus fugit. So on that note, I'll say I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Thank you so much. God bless and goodbye. And if you have truly enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed.